So I recently photographed this image of the Heart Nebula, and I really love it except for this part right here. This is the Fish Head Nebula. And if we look at Stellarium, you can see the Fish Head Nebula here. The issue is that with my camera, I just don't quite have enough field of view to grab it all. And that's because I'm using the ASI 294 MC Pro, and that is a micro four thirds format. And so what I decided to do was to go ahead and do a mosaic and grab the remaining data before it was too late, because in a few months I won't be able to image this at all, and I wanted to get it this year. So I'm going to show you how I got the Fish Head Nebula along with everything else in just a 2-panel mosaic. And the next little piece of information is that I'm going to do this with all free software. I have an open source Sirl processing for the image processing, and for the mosaic I have a simple utility that I've downloaded. It was like a light version, and so all of those are for free. Now there are a couple ways to do mosaics. One thing, you can use the ASIair and use the mosaic function. I believe that Nina probably has something like this, and there's some other software. And that would be great if I had planned it ahead of time, but I did not. And so what I did is I framed it about like this, where I wanted to get the heart in, and I thought the heart was more important instead of cutting the heart off like this. And so I initially framed it like this, and I got as much of the fish head as I could. And then I realized that all I needed to do was to shift the camera parallel about like this, and then grab that image here on a separate imaging session and stitch them together. And then I could do it without a mosaic tool. And that's exactly how I got this image here, and I'll show you that. And here you can see in my mosaic that I have all of the image here of the fish head and the heart in one. And if we compare that to the original one, then you can see how I had it cut off. So here I am in the middle of my imaging session, but I want to show you how I got the lower part of this just the way I wanted to. First thing I did was I went into image management, and I went and found the first image. So here is the first image, and you can see down here at the lower on the bottom, it's cutting off part of that nebula. I just did not have the field of view to do it. So I got to this point right here, and then just pressed the go to button, and the scope slewed to this exact location. Alright, so now let's go back to our imaging session. And now when I did that, I was in the preview mode. This is auto run, so it's slightly different, but it's the same type of concept. And then the lower left down here is the Sky Atlas button. Now when I initially previewed it, it was about like this, the red box, where it was cutting off this important part of the nebula. And so what I did is I drug it so that the target would be like this, with the lines are parallel, and would completely include the target that I did not have the field of view to grab before. And when I was just as close as I could get with these lines parallel on the side, then I pressed the go to button. And at that point, the scope slewed to where I wanted, and then I could just go into the auto run mode and start the new imaging session for tonight. And this is a really handy feature that I use a lot. Sometimes you go, if you just say IC 1805 and it just goes to the center, and maybe it's not quite right and you can move it around. I do this a lot, but in this case it really didn't matter what I did. I just didn't have the field of view in order to get the entire target in at once. Now I did run into some issues which I will discuss here. Look at this image and look at the lower left, and you can see that there is what appears to be a bunch of noise. And so this didn't work out very well for this particular one, but I found a way to correct it. And the general procedure is to process each image to the best that you can, and so that they are as consistent as possible. I've tried it a bunch of different ways, but this seemed to work out best for me. So here's the result file right here, right from the stacking process, and I use Sirl scripts. So if we put this into auto stretch, we can get an idea what's going on here. You can see that I have some rotational issue. I have not been able to figure out what this is, but when it does the meridian flip, I get this issue. But anyway, what I do is I come in here and crop out all that I can use, And I'm going, this may not be exactly like the picture that I just showed you, but I had to experiment a couple of times, and so this is how I got it. So we're in linear mode, and the first thing I want to do is do a background processing. Now we can, I have found that on a complex image like this that it's better to just put in points that are not on stars and it's easier than trying to unset these points. Alright, then I'm going to switch this to a histogram, and we're going to compute the background and take a look. Alright, we still have a little bit of a gradient going on, so I'm going to try again. Alright, it's a little more consistent. We can take a look at the auto stretch and see how that's going to preview. And that's not too bad. I had a lot more difficulty with this one because I shot the lower half at a full moon, and it just couldn't be worse timing, but I did it anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and apply. So the next thing I want to do is sometimes the color calibration, yes, I'm going to do a color calibration and get that even. Okay, the color calibration succeeded because it picks up the metadata right from the file. And then you can see we've got some green noise, so I'm going to remove the green noise, or at least reduce it. Now for a complex image like this, manually stretching it with the hyperbolic stretch function or the StarNet processing, I've had difficulty, and the difficulty I had is that this area right here is so bright that it just didn't seem to work out that great when I tried to do it manually. So I'm going to put it back in linear, and I've done this a couple of times. For this one I'm just going to do the auto stretch just because it's a little bit more consistent for this complex of an image. And so now we have a linear image, and I'm going to take this into Gimp. See, I have many versions here, so I'll just call this one the tutorial version and then save it as a JPEG. Now if we open the tutorial result into Gimp, and we'll see if we can get it as consistent as the last time I did it, which was this one. And so the first thing I'm going to do is a curves adjustment, and this will immediately adjust the black point. And then I'm trying to get the contrast. And then because of the full moon, I think this introduced a bunch of noise right here. And so let me see how close I'm getting to the one I did just a few minutes ago. Oh, I hate it when that happens. If you don't hit apply, then it doesn't save it in Gimp. So I have to do that all over again, and at this time I have to hit apply. So I'm not going to clip there. We're going to bring this down a little bit and bring this up. We have to watch these areas because I don't want to blow this out, but I want to get rid of as much of this noise from the full moon as I can. Now I believe that's pretty close. I can always undo, so let's go compare. Yeah, that's pretty close. In fact, I like this one a little bit better because I have a little bit of more of a noisy look here. I like the contrast better in this one. Alright, so now that we have this is panel number 2, and we're going to export it at full. So I'm just going to add Gimp here at the end and then export it back into the same directory at 100% quality. Now here's the utility that I have. I got this on the Apple Store. This is Panorama Stitcher Mini. This is the free version. And so there's the last one that I did, but let me show you how this works. First we're going to say File New. And then you just drag at least 2 images here. And so what I have is V3, and here's the tutorial version. And then I have this image here, which was all of the processes except for StarNet. And I think the only thing I did differently here was probably a little saturation. So that's something that you want to do consistently between the two. So anyway, you drag them in here like this, and then the program just starts working immediately. Alright, now that that's done, you can see some of the rotational issues here that we had before that due to the meridian flip. You can export it and then crop it in another program, or you can do, I believe, this function right here, which will automatically crop all of it. Now, as you can see on this one, I've got almost all of the noise from the full moon out of here. And I think the color balance between the two is pretty good. And so that's all there is to it. And you just hit the save button, and then it'll export the stitched version. Well, let's see, we'll do that now. It's going to add a bunch of parameters to the file name, but I just accepted the default. And now here is the combined stitched image, and I think this looks better than the one I had done prior to the tutorial. This is not blown out. I've got good detail of the Fish Head Nebula, and I don't see too much noise here. Now, there are ways that you can make this better. For one thing, I would suggest doing this as close together as possible so you're under the similar lighting conditions. I shot this image a couple of weeks ago, and the moon was like at maybe, I don't know, 20% at most, and then I finished it up last night at full moon, and that made it just that much harder. But I went ahead and did it anyway, and I think the results are not too bad, but I could do better for sure. But anyway, that's how you can do it, really, and it really wasn't that difficult. The hardest part is trying to get these two images to balance out of one another. And I really wish I could do it right from a linear state before it's been manipulated at all. I did try it because I created TIFF files for the unstretched versions, and it failed. And so I think PixInsight can do that from a linear, and that would be the absolute best way to do it, because then you could manipulate your data all at once. But I didn't have that, and I'm not going to pay for PixInsight, and so I'm going to do it with the tools that I have available to me. So that's it for today, but I just want to make one other note, that is, if you want to see how to do mosaics with the ASIair, I've already released a tutorial a while back, and it goes through step by step how to do the panels automatically and create an imaging session that does all of this just automatic without you having to fiddle with it. So if you want to see that, there's a link in the description below.